Are you looking to unlock the true power within you, to embrace your unique magic and radiate confidence in every aspect of your life? Step into a realm where your doubts and insecurities vanish like smoke in the wind? Well, the Confidence Witch is here to guide you on a transformational journey like no other. Picture yourself as a sorceress harnessing the energy of the universe to manifest your dream life. Embrace your unique talents and the full spectrum of your magic. Emma, the Confidence Witch, will help you align with the moon, unlock the secrets of the tarot and embrace the power of crystals for heightened intuition and guidance. Whether you're a seasoned practitioner like me or just starting to explore the world of witchcraft, Emma will tailor her guidance to suit your unique path. She knows that every witch's journey is different and will help you find your own way to your inner witch and a circle of like-minded folks, crafting a personal practice that resonates with your soul. Are you ready to step into your power and embrace the magic that lies within you? Take the leap with the Confidence Witch. Visit her website at emmaandersoncoaching.com to learn more, unleash the witch within and let your spirit soar. Hello and welcome back to the Songs or Spells podcast with your host, Karlyn King. That's me. And this week we have a very special guest. Small town born and fled, Joshua Satchel migrated to Brighton in 2013 to pursue his songwriting career. He met his collabo brother Will Nash, formed the band Frankie Furlow, whose short-lived existence brought them to stages at Glastonbury, European tours and writing trips to my favourite, Nashville. Simultaneously, the young wordsmith began co-writing with artists and producers in the US, UK, Europe. Inspired by helping others to tell their stories and bored of hearing unqualified voices misrepresenting transgender tales, he decided it was time to tell his own. The result was the debut album Present in the Post, set for release this year, with lyrical candour, genre-queer arrangements and a harmony-driven band of talented friends. SATCH is not only sonically connecting with the marginalised, leaving them feeling less alone, but imploring they share their own stories too. SATCH isn't a project aiming to change the music industry. SATCH is a project aiming to change the world. Get excited. And you must check out SATCH's own podcast called SATCH and Leo's Transmission. He calls it a funny but honest podcast fronted by two FTM mates chatting shite about trans rights, plights and drunken nights. From dildos to dildon'ts to surgery scars and emotional ones, you can expect lots of oversharing but even more laughs. So let's dive in. I think when we first met in the BIM kitchen,
yeah.
Away, I was like, this is someone who's into like development mindset, growth mindset, being really super proactive, basically gets off the couch and goes out and gets shit done.
I don't even know how we got talking, to be honest, because I don't think anyone ever introduced us. I think we just happened to both be in this staff room on the same day of the same, and we just started chatting about all this stuff. Like, yeah, maybe that was an energy thing. I don't know.
Definitely your vibe attracts your tribe.
Oh, okay. I need to be writing these down.
All these sayings. I know I should start making merch, really. That's what I should be doing.
Definitely do it.
But yeah, I just thought that you were super that kind of growth mindset vibe, and it's whatever you want to call it, whether it's like consciousness, development, mindset, witchy stuff in my case. I think it's all one and the same.
I think what you're saying, yeah, I think we all just call it different things, I guess. So for you, you'd probably use terminology like spells and witchiness, as you just said, and all that sort of stuff. For me, yeah, I'm definitely spiritual and definitely have that growth mindset. I think you only grow out of your comfort zone. So I'm always trying to put myself out and do new things, and just kind of, I have a saying that's pursuit makes purpose of the pain. And for me, that pursuit is songwriting, and I basically have this mission to make everyone a songwriter. And I think that's sort of maybe become a religion almost, where that's sort of part of my practice. And I think songs can be spells, songs can be prayers, songs can be all those sorts of things. So yeah, I think you have identified me correctly in that sense.
Did you say on your podcast that you had a religious background?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very much so. So my whole family, especially my mother's side of the family, uh, come from a very Christian background. My parents both play in the worship band at their church. They still do. My mum is an elder at her church now that they've let women become elders. My sister used to work for the church. So yeah, I grew up in Sunday school and in that kind of culture. Yeah, I'm often quoted as being from Brighton, but I'm from a small town about 10 miles west of Brighton, which
Oh,
I always say is it's 10 miles geographically, but a million miles politically.
wow.
It's I grew up in quite conservative circles. So yeah, I think yeah, as you can imagine, being a trans man, there's been a journey there, that's for sure. And I still do go to church sometimes, but not that one. I go there's one in London that I go to, which is a kind of all inclusive church, which is all kind of about those real sort of core principles of just helping other people, charity, spirituality, creativity, all these sorts of things. So I think, yeah, like I said, we all just kind of have our own different framework and terminology for referring to those ideals, I guess. And yeah, this is in part why I found songwriting. I think all songwriters are people that have something to say that maybe haven't been able to say it in a different area of their life, so are saying it in songwriting instead. And yeah, I think that's coming from that background, maybe not being able to say certain things and have certain conversations. I've been able to do that through songwriting, which in part has become a spiritual practice, I guess you would say. So yeah, does that answer your question? As ever, this is like for me being on this side of it, like we always have people apologizing, going, "Sorry, I've ranted. Did that answer your question?" And now I'm doing it back to you. So there you go.
That absolutely answered the question. Yeah, so you are very much a spiritual being, and songs are spells or tools to communicate that. And I love that on your website it says sonically connecting with the marginalized, making people feel less alone and encouraging them to share their stories. So, I mean, that is completely spirituality
Yeah,
spelled.
that is my core belief. I think especially when you co-write with people, actually, like that can be such a spiritual thing to do in a way to connect with someone else. But I did a master's in songwriting, and my research was, does sharing our stories vulnerably and authentically in songwriting break down barriers of prejudice? Yeah, I think we've all felt that feeling where we hear a song that someone else has been very vulnerable in, and it you just feel like they're articulating your pain in a way you couldn't do yourself.
Yep.
And that's like they've just reached out and sonically held your hand for 3.5 minutes. And as songwriters, that's what we're trying to do, and trying to extend that for other people as well. And I think relatability is a direct response to vulnerability. Yeah, that's my kind of my ethos, I guess.
I love that. And vulnerability is something that's not encouraged, I think, in our world so much. And
You need to come to one of my songwriting classes, mate.
yeah,
Because
you're
that is yeah, encouraged, insisted upon. Yeah, especially with, you talk about our world, but our world in songwriting at the moment, with the kind of rise of chat GPT and stuff like
yeah,
that, there's a lot of songwriters terrified that all the songwriting jobs are going to be taken. And I think they will in some ways. Chat, there's no way you're going to fight against that. But I think the thing I love about songwriting is the humanity of it and the vulnerability of it. So the invention of things like chat GPT, that just calls for us as not just songwriters, creatives all over, people, to give more of that vulnerability, because I don't think it's possible for a robot or an algorithm to be vulnerable. So that's our edge. That's what we have. That's what we've got to bring to the table.
yeah, greatest power. Yeah, it took me a long time to realize that in
Yeah.
life and to start to express that. But when you do, you're right. It's like a superpower.
And
And
it
yeah,
absolutely is, but it's also, it's terrifying.
yeah,
It's terrifying. I the especially like if you think about recording music and live music, why do people bother going to see music live? Because you could just listen to it, and you could just listen to a record, which will be a perfected version, likely. I really like those records where it's sort of capturing a moment in time in the room rather than a super polished record. But you could just do that. Yet we still all go out and listen to live music, and we missed that during the pandemic. And it's because of that vulnerability. It could go wrong at any time. That requires so much vulnerability for somebody to get up on a stage and say, yeah, here's a song I wrote about this person that broke up with me, or me coming out to my parents, or my father dying, or anything like that, and then pouring their heart out live in front of you. That just, we marvel at that, but we're inspired by that.
Yeah.
And that human connection is essential. Again, we know it from the pandemic, from not being able to have it as much. I think that's the thing that everybody missed the most was
Totally.
being that energy, bringing it back to energy, what you talk about a lot. So
Yeah, I think everything's energy. Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely.
totally. That's so interesting. So that the obvious question then would be, what are the songs that have been those beacons of light for you personally?
Wow. Okay. How long have you got? Yeah, I get these questions a lot about like specific songs, and it's always hard to think of them off the top of your head. I know that some of the songs that first got me into songwriting, and this is a controversial person to pick maybe, but it's true, is that there's a John Mayer song called Waiting on the World to Change. And I know he's a controversial character, but you cannot deny his songwriting ability. I remember hearing that song and just being like, it's not nuanced at all. It's not complex. It's just a really simple song. We're waiting on the world to change. And I was just feeling like, yeah, really frustrated in my hometown, and feeling that, and then wanting to do that, and wanting to do that through songwriting. Loads of others, super vulnerable ones. I love country music. We were just talking about Nashville
Yeah.
before we hit record, actually. But that kind of level of songcraft, I love Jason Isbell, Casey Musgraves, these sorts of songs. And it's not so much about the music as such, it's about the songwriting. They call country music 3 chords and the truth. I call my music 3 7th chords and the truth.
Yeah.
I love more kind of jazz harmony when we
Yeah.
talk about music, but I really love the form of song and trying to write within that. And those people do that, and that just really chimes with me for some reason. People that prioritize the message and the story of the song, and then use the music to accentuate that, rather than often people that make the music and put the words with it after. I'm nothing against that at all. It just doesn't seem to chime with me in the same way. So often it's those kinds of artists. I love K Tempest as well. I don't know if you've ever listened to K Tempest.
Yeah.
K Tempest is one of my favorite writers, and they're a queer writer, and they're talking about things that you haven't necessarily heard discussed in songwriting before, not very commonly anyway.
Mhm.
And that's what I try to do with my writing. When my debut album comes out this year, and it's all about my transition. And at first I was like, how the hell do I write about that? Because often what we do as songwriters is we hear songs that have gone before. Oh, that's how you talk about love, that's how you talk about heartache, that's how you talk about this. And then we sort of regurgitate that in our own idiolect, our own language, and then we put that into our songs. But I didn't necessarily know where I could hear this sort of stuff talked about before, things like deadnaming, misgendering, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And but eventually that went from being a problem to me reframing that as what an opportunity to sort of navigate waters that maybe hadn't been so commonly navigated before. And K Tempest is someone that definitely has navigated them for sure. Yeah, sorry, went off at many tangents again.
No, we're totally going to get into what your record Present in the Post is all about. And I think maybe this is how we got talking, is that for the past year I've been teaching. So my research is very much on gender in the music industry, but for the past year I've been really teaching in broader terms, which is really getting into things like queer theory. And I don't have that lived experience, so I got people in to do a panel who could give that lived experience And it was like the Wizard of Oz when they lift the curtain back. It was like, why is this not in mainstream media? Why? And this is why I think this is the root of prejudice, right? Is that people don't know, they don't understand, they don't ask.
I think in the media, I've maybe started to see more queer stories told in TV
Yeah,
and cinema, but not so much within music. There's definitely queer people that have been queer songwriters and queer musicians that have been there telling their stories maybe in more covert ways for decades now, like Freddie Mercury, George Michael, David Bowie, Elton John, like, all of these people. And then as part of my research, I looked at something that I called the spectrum of explicitness. I don't know, explicitness,
wow.
whatever that means, where I was looking at the difference with gender queer artists in people who are out but don't talk about their gender or their queer experiences in their songwriting. And I think we're sort of on the cusp of a revolution now, almost, where you have people like Sam Smith, for example, Kim Petras, people like that, who are unapologetically being visibly trans at this point in music, whereas maybe before that wasn't so possible for whatever reason. Yeah, I think maybe we're getting to that place now, which is very needed, because I don't think it's ever been, or not in my lifetime anyway, I don't think it's ever been sort of more terrifying politically than what's going on. And that's no coincidence, I guess. Like that there's that need for it socially, and now those queer artists are stepping up for that need, I think. So yeah.
Totally. I mean, how do you feel about, being in the UK right now?
Yeah, not great. Not just because of the weather. Yeah, I was just talking about this with Leo, my
Yeah.
host, co-host, earlier today. At the moment, there are calls, especially by the Conservative Party, but actually also I believe that Labour may have got involved in this as well, to change the Equality Act, which would result in all manner of day-to-day problems for trans people, such as not being able to use the bathroom that they need to use and having to use the bathroom that for the sex they were assigned at birth. So a trans man like myself, a trans man, there are many trans men of all different shapes and sizes, some with huge beards, some with, you know, more testosterone than cis men, like super burly men that would have to go into women's bathrooms based on that law. So it makes no sense. It not only would cause a great amount of discomfort for trans people, but how do you police that? What do you do? Do you if it's based on genitals, are you checking people's genitals at the door? That's going to affect cis women as well. It's just not possible to do. And that's just one of many examples of the trans agenda, as it's so beautifully referred to sometimes, is being used as a political football. Yeah, culture wars, as they call it. That's what's going on in the UK right now. And it has a very real effect for trans people. That when you see headlines on the Daily Mail or newspapers like that, or people consider it an intellectual debate on TV and often don't have any trans representation in those debates, it's a point of interest, something a conversation starter to have in a pub for many people. Those conversations being had about trans people, which are interesting for some people, end up being harrowing for trans people, where, then that person that's read the Daily Mail that day has then gone and discussed that in a pub later on, and then the person they've discussed it with has shouted abuse at a trans person later that day. Like there's this trickle down effect that, yeah, trans people can attest to if they're given the chance to speak. So that's how I feel about about living in the UK right now. There, of course, are worse places to live for trans people, but it feels like very much, I think always we're liberalizing. The world is always evolving, but it's non-linear, and often we go really far backwards before we go forwards. and people's lives are often the kind of collateral damage for that evolution. So yeah, not feeling too positive about that at the moment. You maybe if you caught me on a different day, it would have been better.
Yeah, but yeah, this is the reality, isn't it? And this
Yeah.
is your lived experience. So, I mean, when you realized that you were transgender, was there different terminology then?
Whatever the terminology was, I didn't know what it was. Like I said, I had quite a sheltered upbringing and didn't. I thought I was the only person. I thought I was. I yeah. I mean, kids growing up today getting to see people like Kim Petras
Yeah.
winning a Grammy and all that sort of stuff, and that representation is just amazing. Like for me, I'm 33 now, so I grew up predominantly in the 90s and the noughties. I was born in 89. So and like I said, in a very sheltered small town environment, I just thought I was the only person. I didn't even know what it was. I wouldn't know how to refer to it. I was just like, what is going on here? I'm a boy, but everyone's calling me something else. This just
Right.
makes no sense. And trying to make sense of that on my own
Yeah.
was a fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, here I am, kind of out the other side in some senses, and I think that's why it's so important for me, as terrifying as it is, to tell my story and to write my story in songwriting and kind of be a part of that positivity and a part of that change. Off the back of the last question, when I was saying you've not caught me feeling very positive about this today, but then tomorrow I'll go and write a song, and that's our kind of that's our way to rebel, I think, and that's our way, whatever that is, for people making films, people having conversations,
Mm.
being visible if they're safe to do so, all that sort of stuff. That's how that creativity and that authenticity, that's how we just sort of fight back against all that negativity, I think. So
Totally.
yeah, but terminology, no, I didn't know what it was then. Some rather unpleasant terms, I imagine.
And on the album, you're touching on being misgendered, deadnaming. You're even getting into addiction.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of so I knew I wanted it to be this kind of like it's my story, so I wanted it to be in that kind of chronological order, but also with each song touching on a different facet of the trans experience, or at least my trans experience. Yeah, and some of those are really specific to being trans, such as being misgendered, which for anyone listening that doesn't know is when someone calls you by the incorrect pronouns, be that intentionally or accidentally, and being dead named, which is when somebody calls you by your name that you no longer go by, your name you were assigned at birth, which are really triggering things for a trans person. It's not necessarily about being offended, which a lot of the right wing press like to perpetuate it is. It's about being triggered into dysphoria, and that can really mess you up for quite some time. So that's something that's really specific to the trans experience. But then I also wanted to look at subjects, more common subjects, but through a trans lens, such as religion and sex and addiction and stuff like that. So the song you're referring to, Alcathene, is a day in the life of a trans person that has woken up in the morning and has seen a debate on one of those morning shows about trans people that I was sort of talking about earlier, and has been triggered, and then spends that day trying to overcome that, but spirals, and then ends up drinking through it and then caffeinating themselves the next day, physically, literally, and also metaphorically trying to get through the day, and it just goes round and round, and it's this kind of groundhog day before you can actually transition. So yeah, that's one example of the songs on there.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you Spellcast, your weekly astrological guide for the week ahead. And here we are. If you're listening to this on the day of release, it is August 8th, and it is the Lionsgate 88 portal. This is a galactic gate that delivers high frequency energy into our beings, allowing us to rebirth our spirit energy and the spirit energy of Mother Earth. So this is all about manifesting. So if you set some goals at the start of the year or at the last new moon, you need to sit with these and you really need to meditate on how it would feel to already have these and then act as if. So whatever it is that you want to bring in, acting as if really raises the energy and allows the universe to really deliver. So get out of your own way, stop stressing about it. It's very, very common to feel stressed about this. Surrender it, let it go to the universe, because it always has a plan. And you know what? It'll be this or something better. Now, back to my chat with SATCH. Do you use the term Boggarts at one point to push
Yeah.
the way? I was like, wow.
Which is a spell, so it's perfect for this podcast. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard about one of the writers in this country that has a big following, maybe using their writer's pen and their voice for not the most positive outcomes. Yeah, and there is a spell in one of those writers' books which is called Ridiculous, but spelt with double K, and it's a boggart is something that is your fear or something, or your kind of, yeah, the thing that you fear or the thing that causes you pain. So the lyric in the song is ridiculous to turf those boggarts. The writer that I'm talking about is part of a group called the TERFs, which is trans excluding radical feminists, who are a group of people that don't believe that trans women are women and use their voices and sometimes more to kind of cause trans women a lot of exclusion and pain. So yeah, that's the lyric, ridiculous to turf those boggarts. That's as much interpretation as I can give you. You can deduce the rest yourselves.
Incredible and so concise and amazing. I love it. The themes are incredible. I mean, talking about alcohol and going out to push those Boggarts fears, issues away. I mean, this is something that you went through, right? Is this something that you actually experienced?
Yeah, for sure. Like, and I've got another song on the, oh, it's not really a song, it's an interlude called Ketamine in Kemptown. And Kemptown, if you don't know, is kind of the eastern part of Brighton, where there's a lot of the LGBT community go and live in. It's where the kind of all the gay bars are, and yeah, it's the less expensive part of Brighton, so it's often the only place that people who have had to kind of flee even other places in the country have moved to. It's often the only place they can afford to live. And I think that happens a lot, where, I mean, all kinds of people, whether hetero people, cis people, like, we all have different ways of numbing the pain that we're in. I think that's a very natural human thing to do, to want to stop being in pain. And we all have different ways of doing that. For some people, it's social media. For some people, it's drugs. For some people, it's alcohol. Like, you know, whatever it is, kind of more harmful ways of numbing than maybe doing something positive, such as songwriting or a podcast or whatever it is. Creativity is kind of, I find, is the positive way to deal with a lot of the pain that we're in. But for me, definitely as a teenager, especially trying to work that out, trying to work everything out, I definitely was using alcohol a lot to do that. And I still drink now, but I drink in a much more healthy way. Sometimes I think if I'm really struggling, I'm definitely at risk of that creeping in more. So I definitely have to monitor that. I think a lot of people can probably relate to that, especially in this country. Like, drinking culture is what it is in the UK, right? It's kind of unlike many other countries in Europe. It's definitely a spectrum for me, and it can get to a place where it's not so healthy. So if I'm struggling, less so now, because I'm in a much better place than I was when I was a teenager, you know. But yeah, it's something to monitor and keep an eye on before, and for sure. And that's what I tried to put into that song.
You're so self-aware, and I think that is like the key to life, is just being self-aware.
I think trans people are naturally very self-aware. Turning that self-conscious into self-awareness, and also a shit ton of therapy as well. So, you know.
Amen to the therapy. I'm not religious, by the way. I'm very spiritual, but amen. You know what I mean? I think everyone should do therapy. I think it should be like mandatory. I think it should be rolled out in school. It should be part of the school experience, because it's the only way you get self-aware. If you're not And it's the only way you start to see patterns and recognize things and just
I don't I don't know
yourself.
if I don't know if it should be made mandatory, because I think forcing someone to do therapy might
Yes.
not have the outcomes that we're looking to have. Might kind of ruin it a little bit. But I agree with you. I think
Like available.
I think
Yeah, just available.
everybody should do it, but off their own free will.
It was someone on of a CEO and they were a neuroscientist.
Okay.
And they were saying that they would never date anyone unless this person was in therapy and doing the work.
In therapy at the time, not like post therapy, just permanently being therapized. Your therapy doesn't always have to be like sitting in a room talking to a psychiatrist or psychologist about your life and paying £50, £100 an hour. That doesn't always have to be what therapy is. You can find therapy in different ways: yoga, meditation,
Definitely.
co-writing often, as I mentioned earlier, or songwriting on its own, just kind of cathartic practice, checking in with yourself, self-awareness and growth, like what we sort of started with. So
Totally. Yeah, I love all those things. So, what other ways do you use to stay sane?
to stay sane. Wow, I don't know if I've worked that out yet. What do I do? I think I can be a bit of a workaholic because songwriting is my work, and I'm so passionate about it.
Mhm.
Get almost, I don't think addiction's the right maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe I'm having a self-awareness moment right now. But yeah, I think I can be a bit of a workaholic, and I struggle to switch off sometimes, because I feel when you feel like something is your purpose, if you're not doing it, you feel like, what am I doing? I'm lost immediately just for taking a break. But I think taking a break is so important. And when I try and reframe that as kind of active resting rather than being passive,
Yeah.
that really helps. And my wife's very good at forcing me to do that, to take a break. And I have a son now as well, and
Mm.
spending time with him, yeah, definitely helps me to kind of recalibrate. And yeah, you can get really sucked into the kind of like living in London as well, the rat race, the kind of the commercial side of things, all that sort of stuff, almost the competitive nature of music, of the music industry. Whereas I I need to step back from that and rest to be able to remember what it's all about, and remember that it's about this connection with other people and trying to share these stories and break down barriers and creative pursuit, rather than commercial pursuit,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I think doing that, I love quiz shows. And like, this is really random to say, but like just sitting down and watching a quiz show I really like, and that makes me switch off. And just watching comedy and stuff. I quit watching the news, because the
Yeah.
news,
Mhm.
I quit watching it at the start of this year, because I would get so into it, especially into politics, and it would be all I talk about, and I didn't realize how stressed it was making me.
Mhm.
And I think just cutting that out, and just when I do have a break, making it that, like, just watching something like either football, I love football, comedy or quiz shows, that sort of stuff, spending time with family, chilling out, that's what keeps me sane.
Those are great because you're just kind of rooting for the person.
And it's just light-hearted. I think
Yeah.
when you like, songwriting can be so intense a lot of the
Yeah.
time, especially if you're co-writing with other people and they're sharing their stories with you, and you're helping them put that into song, which I love. I love that almost more than, possibly more than writing my own story, is yeah, that doing that with other people, and you get this great feeling from that, and that you've helped someone do that. That's also really intense and can be really draining, and you don't because you love it, you don't realize that you sort of need that break. So doing things like that are light-hearted like that. I wish I could say something to you like, yeah, running and stuff that's really healthy, but that's not really happening at the moment, being honest with you. At the moment, I'm working really hard as this album's coming out. I'm writing a lot with other people. So I should be doing things like reading and running and healthy stuff, but I'm not. I'm watching football, I'm watching quiz shows if I have half an hour at the end of the day. But I'll get right on that reading and running, and then I'll come back on the podcast and tell you about that another time.
No, I think it's absolutely cool, but it's kind of like what Glenn Matlock was saying when he was on the podcast, and he said his therapy was going to the football, the kind of camaraderie that goes with it, the release that goes with it, and also like people watching in cafes in like North London, just sitting watching people.
But what people watching always leads to songwriting for me.
That's what he said.
Yeah, I think a lot of people like they might relax by listening to music, but if I listen to music, I'll get inspired, and then I will go straight back to writing and to working and do it. So if I'm really trying to switch off from that, I need to do something different. Yeah. I think so often on things like social media as well, which I try to avoid. I put stuff out on social media because as a songwriter, that's kind of, but I try to avoid going on it to relax, and I try to use it, not consume it, if that makes sense. But I think a lot of people on social media are always putting about how super healthy they're being, and they're running, they're reading, they're eating healthy, they're doing all this stuff. But sometimes I think that can be a little bit like not true and can make people feel like they're not doing well enough. So sometimes I think it's important to just say, yeah, do you know what? I'm just watching TV for half an hour at the end of the day. Like just being authentic and being honest about it. Yeah. I agree with Glenn.
Yeah, keeping it real, definitely. I have just finished rewatching all of Stranger Things.
Okay.
Start to finish, all 4 seasons. Yeah, 4 seasons.
I've never seen it.
My God, you would love it.
I've heard great things, obviously. But yeah, I'm a bit of a wimp with stuff like that, to be honest. Anything that's like remotely scary, I'm just like
bit scary, yeah.
It'd be too scary for me. I'll watch it and then I'll have nightmares and I'll be messaging you like, you told me to do the things.
I mean, weirdly, I won't spoil it, but there is a thing in it which is, I guess, like a boggart.
Yeah, no, I've heard this. I've also heard about isn't it something to do with a song that saves them from it?
Music saves them from the boggart. Yeah.
Which is exactly what we've been talking about for the last 4 years. So like, maybe I should watch this. What is wrong with me?
Yeah. Do you know which song it is? Like the key song?
Yeah, it's Kate Bush, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't want to ruin that either, but yeah.
And now we've managed to turn this into a quiz as well, which is what I wanted.
What is the song in Stranger Things?
See, I've not seen it and I've still passed the quiz. I told you I was good at quizzes.
Do you know what was so funny after that is people were like, oh, it's great to see Kate Bush getting the recognition she deserves. And it's like, what? Kate Bush is already a legend.
Yeah, come on now. Do your homework, please.
Exactly. But yeah, that song is amazing. It's running up that hill. It's just so emotive.
It is cool that it sort of brought it back and introduced it to so many people that maybe wouldn't have come across it for whatever reason if it wasn't things like that's I'll give it that for sure. But to give the recognition, she's had a bit of recognition in her life.
Winona Ryder, who's in the show, was wearing like a Kate Bush t-shirt, and she was like, you need to use Kate Bush songs in the soundtrack, and that was the sort of genesis of it. Yeah,
my wife is a super fan of Kate Bush, so I know she was very happy that it was back on the radio.
Next for you, your album Present in the Post. Love it, obsessed with it. Those 4 tracks that you sent me over. I love that there's a shout out to Springsteen on it as well. Are you a huge fan of Bruce?
Do you know what? I am, but it's not like I've got Leo, my podcast co-host Leo, he was brought up on Springsteen big time. Like he is obsessed with Springsteen, and I wasn't really brought up on Springsteen or on music like that. I was like I said, I was brought up on a lot of Christian music, a lot of gospel music, stuff like that. And then as I got older, then I started discovering all these great songwriters. Speaking of trivia, Springsteen this is a great fact about Springsteen. He is the only person to have had a #1 record in the last 5 decades.
Wow.
Not a bad record to have, is it? But yes, it just sort of, it was more, I more came to that song from the wordplay of like being the boss.
Yeah.
And I knew I wanted to, I was playing around, it was quite early on in writing the album, and I was playing around with all these songs about dysphoric days, I guess, which is kind of more what Alcathene became, the song that we were talking about earlier, like a day in the life of dysphoria. But it was more the wordplay of like the boss, and I just had that line, I wish I was the boss like Springsteen, not and not being the boss in the sense of, I don't know, everybody recognizing you and fame and that sort of stuff. And maybe on first listen that's what it sounds like, but when you listen again, it's more just about just being the boss of your own life and just being, not having recognition of fame or what we were talking about with Kate Bush, recognition like that, just being recognized like for who you are, not people perceiving you as something you're not. So I just had that line, yeah, I wish I was the boss like Springsteen, and then decided to use it to almost pay respect to my love of songwriting. And I just decided to try and build all the lyrics out of song titles from great songwriters. So verse 1 is all John Lennon titles, and verse 2 is all Bob Dylan titles, and then the middle 8 is Joni Mitchell. And yeah, it was just a really fun song to write. I often say that all songs are just puzzles to be solved, and
Love
that was like
that.
a real, yeah. Oh yeah, I've got my own quotes that I could have on t-shirts. Maybe we could do a range together. But that, I kind of just gave myself that puzzle to solve of like, right, okay, go and write this song now. There's another one that's limitation breeds innovation. And by giving myself those limitations of, okay, you have to write this whole song now, just using song titles to write the lyrics. That's just a fun puzzle to solve as a writer. And it's one of the more like upbeat songs on the album. It's great to sing live because the crowd sing it back to you. And yeah, no, I'm sorry. I wish I could stand here and say, yes, I've got Bruce Springsteen posters all over my walls. Maybe I'll put them up now because I've more become that fan through researching him and his incredible songwriting.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was I've listened to some of your episodes of the podcast, and I think you're often talking about energy and fate and things working out and the universe and all that sort of stuff. And there was, I believe similar things, I think, and there was something that brought me to that day, and I'm glad it did.
It sounds like it's an album that's going to require like a good few listens to really grasp like your intention, and I love that because I think that's what music should be, puzzles.
Yeah, there's nothing I love more than when a songwriter that I love brings out a new album, and I sit there and I'll listen to their album in order. Has to be in order because it's that order for a reason, and I will read along the lyrics as I'm listening to it.
Yeah.
And just have my mind blown for 45 minutes of just these of just trying to study exactly what they meant and what they're trying to say, and feel that connection as strongly as possible. I don't want to miss anything that they write. So if people want to do that with my album, then great. And if they just want to listen to it once on Spotify in the background, I'll take that as well.
This has been truly magical, and I'm so excited for everything that's to come for you. Speaking to SATCH has been truly magical, like I said. All of their quotes like "pursuit makes purpose of the pain," relatability is a direct response to vulnerability, all of these things have really made me think about openness and connection with others, and how we don't always need to be the boss bitch. We can be vulnerable, and that's okay because there's unconditional love. You can check out SATCH's music and live shows and podcast on their website, therealsatch.com, and check out their gig Devon Pride on Friday the 18th of August and Milton Keynes Pride on Saturday 9th of September. This podcast has been hosted and produced by me, Karlyn King. Come find me on Instagram at Karlyn L. King. Follow the podcast at Songs Are Spells Podcast. Follow us on TikTok at Songs Are Spells, and look out for Tarot Friday every Friday. And if you want a personal reading, reach out to me. See you next week.